Welcome to 5 Minutes with God. We're going to continue our thoughts about what God is like. We've looked at some phrases in Psalm 145, verse 8. He is gracious and full of compassion. We also find here that he is slow to anger. The Lord is slow to anger. This tells us several things. First, it reveals that God himself sometimes is angry. We can actually be very thankful to know about his anger. Psalm 7 tells us that he is angry with the wicked every day. It would be very unjust of God to ignore what is wicked, to overlook the evil that is in the world. We can be confident that the Lord is angry with things that are done that are unrighteous, things that are wicked, things that are wrong. We might often wish that he would correct them on a different timetable. We have a timetable for God to act, and his schedule is often different from ours, but we can be certain that the Lord is angry with the things that are done that are wicked and with the wicked people who have ignored his path of repentance and righteousness. And we must admit that our anger is not always that way. We can be angry without sinning. We're told that in the New Testament in Ephesians 4. But many times our anger is very self-centered. David was angry because he had been insulted in 1 Samuel 25, and he was ready to commit murder. He had to be restrained from writing an injustice against himself and not allowing God to take care of that injustice. Many times, if our anger is focused about things that are done to us, it's going to lead us in the wrong direction. There are times where God's people have been angry properly about injustices done to others, and there is a distinction. Our response to things done to us will often lead us in the wrong direction. And we can recognize the destructiveness of that kind of anger. I know myself how easy it is sometimes to be patient, but in other circumstances, it just seems that anger rises so quickly. And the scriptures describe anger as something that burns. Somebody's anger was kindled. When we burn with anger, it's very destructive. And we have to recognize that even righteous anger can be expressed with unrighteous words and behavior. And it's something to be aware of. But God is always is angry properly. And when we see God expressing his anger, we're told here that he is slow to anger. It's actually a phrase that is used very commonly. The one thing that God is slow at is anger. It's almost an idiom in descriptiveness that God is slow to anger, slow to anger. This phrase, these two words go together. Slow meaning long. It's a long expression of his anger. It's a long time before his anger is expressed. And sometimes the Bible actually translates that word as long-suffering. But when we see that God is slow to anger, it reveals to us something about his character. It tells us that God is mostly interested in relationships. If he was merely interested in being right, then at the first sign of unrighteousness, that relationship would simply be discarded and he would start over. But God is slow to anger. And actually, he is the first one who described himself that way. In Exodus 34, he tells Moses, I am slow to anger. Exodus 34, verse 6, actually is really the basis for Psalm 145, verse 8. All the characteristics about God in this verse here are found there in Exodus 34, verse 6. And the people of God appreciated that description. They valued that description of God's character. Moses heard God say it, and then in Numbers chapter 14, he himself repeated it. He quoted God when he was describing God to the people of Israel. And then there were prophets who described God as being slow to anger. And there were times when David, like here and other Psalms, mentioned God's description, God's character as being slow to anger. It means that God values relationships. What would it be like to really appreciate God's intense interest in maintaining relationships with us? We find in the New Testament that the basis of this is the forgiveness that he offers to us through Christ. God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven us. And on that basis, we have a relationship with the God who is slow to anger. Something to enjoy as we think about what God is like today.